Excellent. Okay. I'm going to give us, see, I now have 12, but some people are still coming. So I hope everybody's doing great. Middle of summer, but maybe some of you are starting school soon. No. Trying to figure out this chat. This is a different webinar format than we've used in the past. So trying to break out rooms. Yeah, might have to have Natasha fix that. Yeah, we keep getting a few people. So just a few more seconds. While we're waiting, I know that Brian Thomas in the welcome session went over kind of the protocol for your participation in these sessions, but you're going to use chat to respond to some of the questions I'm going to ask you for. And I have a Jamboard for part of it. So you'll be using, if you have a QR code reader, or Natasha will be putting the link into chat for you guys. Q&A is if you have a specific question for TCI, something that might be program related or access related. It's something more specific to you. So chat is for all of us. Q&A is if you have a question, and Natasha will be monitoring that. And I think, Natasha, are you here now?
I am here now. We were running a little late out of homeroom, so I think people are still joining. I know, and looks like we've got 65 people that are here with us, Susie, and numbers are still going up. So we'll give them a minute here to get in as you're going through some of that housekeeping information. But I'm here to help Susie out, answer questions that you have today. So feel free, put responses into chat. We also have that Q&A button. If you've got a more in-depth question, you can put it into the Q&A, and I will either answer it in the Q&A app, or I'll save it to answer live during this session at different points where Susie takes questions.
Okay, Natasha, Job Ramos is having trouble hearing us. I don't know if that's something on his end, but I'm assuming everyone else can hear us. Because I got some
good. I hear from Jennifer that she can hear us. So Job, I think maybe a couple of things you might want to try, turning up your sound. You also might want to go to the area where it says audio on your Zoom toolbar, and there's a little caret there. If you click on that, it's going to show you the different speakers you have available. Maybe click on that and see if you could try a different speaker. That may solve the problem. Okay, and we're up to 82 attendees here, Susie, and I think it's kind of leveled off now, so you can go ahead and get started.
That sounds great, Natasha. Thanks so much for helping out. The other thing we just want to remind you is if you need the captions, please click on that in your tools, and if you need to read what we're saying, you can do that. All right, so welcome to response groups. And we are going to, let's see, sorry, having a little bit of navigation problem with my screen. Natasha, help, it's not advancing. Natasha, are you there?
Yep. Okay, can you try the hit forward button on your, maybe go out of present mode and go back in, Susie. And
I think that's what I need to do.
It clears it.
Yeah. I think I misclicked something. Sorry about that, guys. Here we go. All right.
Well, if there's one thing teachers are understanding about, it's technical glitches. So we're there for you, Susie.
Sorry about that. All right, so here we go. And this by teachers for teachers. I am a classroom teacher, and I have a year of experience teaching remotely, as I'm sure probably many of you do. So I am Susie Allione. I've been with TCI since 1998 doing trainings. And working with teachers to help them get up and running with all these fabulous programs that Bert went over in the welcome session. So I spent all of my 25 years teaching at South Tahoe High School in Lake Tahoe, California. And as you can see by some of these pictures here, I love TCI activities. So, you know, we actually had some opportunity to work outside at the end of the year. So I've used so many of the TCI activities over my 25 years of teaching. So there's just nothing that I love better is, you know, working with students, getting them excited. This is what they remember. This is what they come back and talk about. So we're going to be specifically talking about one of the 6 original TCI strategies. So if you're one of those few people that go back to the binder days, since its inception, TCI has these 6 core strategies, and TCI response group activities is probably one of my personal favorites. So I was excited to be able to lead this session. So hopefully some of you have taught some response group sessions using TCI, or you've had discussions in your classroom, but I'm going to be going over the 5 kind of key steps into how to implement this strategy. I would say in any given program, a 5th grade program, a 4th grade program, an 8th grade program, a high school program, you're going to have, you know, 6 or 7 response group activities throughout the course of the year to lead with your students. So I'm going to be going over kind of just the basic requirements for success using that response group strategy. So you can have dynamic discussions in your classroom. And then we're going to go over a toolkit that TCI provides. It's actually in your subscription, but Natasha will be sharing it in the link when we get there in chat. And these are just some additional tools to use to kind of, you know, change up what it is that you're doing with your students. You can take a TCI response group and kind of mix it up a little bit with some of these strategies. And then I'm going to take you into 3 different programs, and we're going to look at actual response group lessons and just talk about how TCI presents them to you for lesson planning for your students. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is a Jamboard. So if you can either copy the QR code, or Natasha is going to put the link to the Jamboard in
yep, it's right there, Susie, in the chat. And, if you can, Susie, if you can change it from view only to give us the edit access, we can start adding in.
Okay. All right. Anyone with the link, it should be.
Oh, you need to change it from viewer to
the editor.
Yeah, there you go.
Got it. Okay. I'll be transparent with you. That was the one thing that my kids always nailed me on in the class. Is, can you please change it to edit mode? So my apologies. All right. So I have a response in here. So what we're doing is looking at, what do you think about when you think about class discussions? So in A, this is one of my favorite pictures. You can see someone herding cats, which I live in kind of ranch country here in Gardnerville, Nevada. And it's, you know, something to behold if somebody could actually get out there and herd cats. So if you feel like, you know, just trying to get control of your classroom, A is for you. If when you go to have a class discussion or you're asking questions and that one student's hand just keeps going up and it seems like it's always a conversation between you and 1 or 2 other people in the class, then this strategy is for you. Or C, it's like, where'd everybody go? Are you even there? It's just an echo chamber in your classroom. So we're starting to see some responses come up. Yeah. Painful. Will this be on the test? Answer, yes. Right?
I see one person said A-B combo.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, 1 or 2 students participating while we're trying to herd the rest.
You see the eyes roll when that hand goes up, right? Oh, this is great.
Oh, and I love to see students are hesitant to talk. And that is so
Yes.
typical. I maybe feel embarrassed. I always like share, going through online learning with my own kids at home. I have one who she's always talking, always talking. I have another one will never say anything in class, but as soon as they would put him into one of those breakout groups, he'd be talking, right? So nervous to share in front of everyone and needs to be like in a smaller group. And that's one of the things you'll see that's so great about response groups is helping students feel a little bit more comfortable sharing.
Yeah, this will give them the opportunity to share and success at sharing. So they'll be more willing in the future. That's why I love it. I get to hear these voices that I only normally hear at the bell when they walk in and at the bell when they leave. Okay, these are great. So we're seeing that we have some commonalities with our experiences with discussions. Yeah, you're right. Middle school students are all over the place. So you could be A, B, or C. I have some experience teaching middle school as well. Excellent. Okay. So thank you for sharing on that. My hope is that the practices, the strategies, if even, what I find when I attend sessions like this is if I get one, maybe two gems that I can take with me and implement in the classroom, then I've been successful. So my hope is that you can walk away with something that will help you. So when you encounter a response group activity in your class, the slides that you're using from the TCI teacher subscription will have instructions for you on exactly how to implement it, okay? All of our response group activities in all of our programs have been set up in such a way to incorporate these 5 best practices. You, as the teacher, one of the beauties of the TCI programs is that you get to then lend your flavor, your teacher flavor, to how you actually implement it with your students. So challenging students to discuss controversial or complex issues in small groups first. So we look at this picture that you're looking at here of these 3, maybe 4 students working in a tight group, having their own conversation among each other that's driven by you with questions. Maybe they're responding to a visual or a chart, graph, what have you, whatever is part of the lesson. They have the safe harbor feeling of being able to talk to each other and not feel like everybody in the class is listening to them. So it gives them confidence. Sometimes in the group, they're answering questions about history, that could be Hamilton versus Jefferson and, who had the best ideas for a form of government, or they could actually be role playing. There's, maybe they could be members of XCOM, which was the government agency committee set up to handle the Cuban Missile Crisis and work with President Kennedy. So if they're role playing, sometimes that gives them a little bit of freedom and flexibility. So challenging students to discuss something complex. It has to be something that they can grapple with. Heterogeneous groupings, that's where your teacher genius really comes in. I had classes where I could allow the students to pick their groups and it always worked beautifully. And I've had those classes where if I did that, I'd go back to response A, herding cats. So that's up to you. If you do happen to have a class where you have a little bit more flexibility and students can choose their groups, you can have fun ways of putting them in groups. Because they're going to be in mostly groups of 3, that's kind of the right dynamic for a small group discussion. And then each one of them will participate by sharing out loud in the different phases of the response group, is things that come in 3. And so, they have to create a group name, the 3 Stooges, not that any of our kids know who they are, but, 3 blind mice, something current. So they can, or you can take a picture of something that comes in 3. I've done this before, things like a 3-ring circus, and you cut it into thirds, like a big 8.5 by 11, and you mix them all up and you pass them out, and then they have to form the groups where the picture matches, and then they'll be the 3-ring circus. So I'll pull that in later when we're talking about response groups. TCI has activities like Desk Olympics, because getting them into a suitable arrangement is really important. So if I'm looking at these students in this lower right image, I actually want to be standing at the front of the room. It looks like the camera person's behind them, but I want all students' eyes on me easily. I don't want anybody with their back to me. So always trying to maintain the right desk settings is really important. And I know sometimes it's challenging in these small classrooms where administration gives you 40 students to start the school year. So you just kind of have to do the best you can. They don't have to each be at their own desk. They can share a desk. Preparing them to answer provocative questions could sometimes be a practice discussion with something that students are familiar with, that students care about. We're going to, on our next slide, we're going to do a little practice like this. And that's just to kind of get them talking, get them loose, get them, it's kind of like warming up for a workout. So also, what's important about number 3 is, instead of assigning whatever the material is that they need to know for the response group for homework, we know that not all of our kids always do their homework. So it could be the way TCI sets it up is the information is right there and chunked out so that the students are exposed to the material, they're in their small groups, they talk about it, and then they're prepared to share. Because that's going to be what that hesitant student that we talked about in the Jamboard, they're not going to want to share if they don't feel prepared. So number 3 is really important to make sure, and you're facilitating that everybody's getting the information at the same time. Then, this is kind of the gray area, allowing them time, but not too much time to prepare their responses. I would say most TCI response group activities say to give students anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes per round. So maybe they just have a paragraph that they have to read, questions that they have to prepare answers to. So depending on the age group, you could give them 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes. You're in charge of the time. So it could be that all of a sudden everybody is done and you're ready to go, and it's only been, 6 minutes. So that's where you come in, and TCI will have a suggestion, but you have to come up with your own. And now you're ready to facilitate a lively discussion. And this, again, is why this is one of my favored TCI strategies, is because now I can have the discussion that I was hoping to have, not with just a couple students. So that's the goal here. So what I would like you to do, and Natasha will monitor this, is take a look at these kind of warm-up strategies. So this is kind of, practicing and preparing for our critical thinking questions, but we're going to do it with a fun topic. So throw in chat something that you think you would want to just have a quick practice teacher chat discussion with. And Natasha, will you pick one of the topics that somebody's suggesting?
Yeah, let's go cats versus dogs. So let's start off with that one. I'm a cat person. I have a dog, but I'm a cat person.
Me too. Cats are independent. Okay, so why cats versus dogs? Cats. My cat is currently banned from this room because she's chatty. And if she came in here, you wouldn't be able to hear me. So, but I do love
here's another fun one we could do: mountains versus beach. So go put in the chat, what would you pick, mountains or beach? And give us a little why. I see a beach.
Beach. Okay, so I live 20 minutes from Lake Tahoe, and I have Bo. But I don't get to go to the beach that often because Lake Tahoe in the summertime is just next to impossible.
I do see beach is kind of winning, but I do see some mountains with a lake, that, yes, love the lakes and the hiking up there in Lake Tahoe near you. But the beach pretty good, especially
Zephyr
when it gets hot.
Cove, that's where I play tennis. Yay, Sandra. Awesome. I'll be up there tomorrow morning. I just paddleboarded there a few days ago. So thank you. That's kind of what we're looking for, is have students perhaps have a little conversation as a group warm-up. And, usually the students all know each other, but it's always a good idea to have them introduce themselves to each other. There's the old share one thing about yourself that maybe other students in the class don't know. But I think you could pick, Instagram versus Facebook. We all know which one of those is going to win with our kids. And pick some topics that you think your kids would want to discuss and give them a few minutes to share as a small group. And then you could have a presenter share, like, what was the consensus in your group, beach or mountains? And now they've been able to chit chat and they're a little looser. And so that's the goal for step 3 in response groups, is to prepare them to answer critical thinking. So now we're going to get into the actual lesson. So that's when you can switch to the actual TCI lesson. Okay.
Can I just add, I love this kind of this or that sort of idea, because the kids love those, and it just, like you said, it gets them warmed up and start talking, so that, and it's about something they already know, right? So now when we go into the content and it's something maybe a little bit more challenging, at least I've gotten warmed up. I feel part of my group. I feel like I can, more ready to share when we turn to maybe some content I'm not as familiar with.
Absolutely. And I think, Natasha, with the next section that we're going to get into, if some of you are wondering, well, I'm going to have some groups that aren't even going to talk about beach or mountains. They're going to talk about the whatever that happened over the weekend, or the little discussion that they just had in the hallway. So these next strategies will hopefully help with that even while they're doing this little silly warm-up, they're going to learn a skill. We're always trying to teach them skills. And one of the most important skills in our classrooms is listening. How do we get our kids to actually listen to each other? So I think, Natasha, you have the link to this. You may have already shared. I'm not monitoring chat. But there is a handout, discussion toolkit. So Natasha's going to share the link to this 3-page toolkit. It's also found, if you have a TCI subscription, you can go into support under TCI approach, and you'll see toolkits linked in there. There's a lot of information in TCI approach, so you kind of have to look for it. But it's linked there, and it's recently been updated. So this discussion toolkit, I'm just going to go over some of these with you. And what I want you to think about is how you might implement them in your class. Maybe you're doing a discussion activity that's not TCI, or you just want to have a discussion about something that recently happened in the news. You're teaching a civics class, at middle school. So red, yellow, green, this one at the top, is awesome. If you can just have good old-fashioned construction paper, and each group has a stack, and they have to, maybe there's a little like business card holder or bigger that they could put, they're at red because they're just starting. And then as they start progressing, yellow, or green if they're good to go. And now you can see, all right, I have most of my groups ready to go. I'm the facilitator. I can go around and help those that are yellow and red. So that's a great one to use to ease your movement around the classroom if you have some restrictions because of classroom size. FISTA 5 is just, it says here it might be more suitable for secondary students. You can ask for a quick, give me how many fingers you are on this. And maybe they have a key at their desk and they get used to using this every time they're in response group, or any kind of group, actually. Everyone restate. This one is kind of interesting, and I really love it because, again, one of the keys to response group is this safe harbor setting where you want students to kind of loosen up and the quiet ones and shy ones to start participating. So if you can train your students to actually listen to each other, teach them about eye contact. And here it says, before they're speaking to the group, they begin with a sentence. Maybe it's an answer to a question that's part of the response group. And the rest of the group has to respond to that. Maybe they're saying, well, so Charlie, you just said that blah, 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 blah. Well, I hear what you're saying when you say this, and they're now proving to each other that they're listening. And there's nothing better for security and being willing to share with a class when it comes time to actually present than knowing that people are listening to you. So I think everyone restate is something that you might want to consider implementing and trying out and seeing if it might invite more quiet students to participate in your classroom. Okay. Repeat, think, breathe, share is kind of like everyone restate, only you're teaching students kind of how to relax, how to breathe, how to take time before they quickly respond. So they're not that, you know, you ask the class a question and up goes, you know, half the class's hands, you know. So you want them to actually pause, think, and if we could teach everybody in the world to do this, I think we might be in a pretty good place right now. So then we're going to look at the one that I use the most is rules for civil discussion. And you can name this however you want. Rules might be, you know, guidelines for civil discussion. But whenever I do response groups, I would have, when it was time to have my presenters go and stand, I would have all the presenters stand at the same time. So they just got used to me saying, whenever we did a response group, presenters, please stand. And slowly everyone would stand and you'd wait for that one group where they're still like, I don't want to go first. You're going to go first. And then they have a certain protocol. So they have to begin with the statement, whether they agree or disagree with the group that went before them and use the group name or use a student's name in the class. They have to provide evidence in their response to the question. And we're going to talk about how you can have additional criteria. Maybe each group has to have 5 facts that support their answer to the question. And as you go through 5 groups, they have to each have a different fact. Then they have to call on the next presenter by name, and then they can sit. So the presenters can't sit until after they've presented. So sometimes it incentivizes them to present first. So talk it outs. I don't know if you remember back when I introduced myself at the beginning of this webinar, I had students that had, this is a classic 11th grade US history activity where we're debating the counterculture of the 1960s and 70s. And some of the students represent mainstream, some of the students represent the counterculture, and they get props. Props are always great just to get them more buy-in if that's appropriate for the activity. And they actually have to face each other and discuss perspectives on an issue. So talk it outs are awesome. There's several TCI response groups that are already set up as a talk it out, but maybe you just want to pull it in and use it where it fits in your curriculum somewhere. Concentric circles are, this is when you might have a lot of different topics that you want to discuss with your class, but you want to make sure that you have equal group sizes, you know, for the 2 circles, inside circle, outside circle. I think of this one as speed dating. And sometimes I set up my classroom a little bit differently for that. But if anybody's ever done a speed dating activity, they're fabulous. And it's a great way for them to learn information one-on-one. And then they switch teams. You know, the outside circle moves one way and now they're with a new person and they share. So this is great if, like when I was teaching US history, they would be reformers during the progressive era, and they would share who they are, what their ideas were for progressive reform, and they would get to meet several of them. Pen pal chats is more of a written idea for students to do. So, you know, they all have to write their answer to a prompt, and then they turn it in to you, and you have a key, maybe number key, And then you mix them up, pass them back out without the names, so they're anonymous, and students have to respond, and then the original person gets them back. And the last two, fishbowl. Fishbowl is pretty classic. It's kind of like concentric circles, but in this case, you have a group in the middle that does all the talking, and the outer group is listening, commenting, maybe filling out a form with questions, maybe taking notes. And then maybe when they're in the middle, they have to use some of what they've heard. So fishbowl discussions are awesome. You have what you need here. And scored discussions. So I closed with score discussions here because I always never failed to score my response group activities. They got used to me. I'd have a clipboard, I would have the groups, I would have it kind of where they were sitting. I'm also going to be sharing at the end of this webinar an idea for what that handout can look like that you use for scoring students' discussions. So what I'd like for you to do now is you're all experienced teachers and you've had experience doing discussions in your class and maybe even with TCI lessons. Share in chat your best discussion practice. And then Natasha can help me.
Yeah, while they're adding those in there, I want to share one that came up earlier. We had, I think it was Alejandro that had shared that they use talking frames. So instead of a sentence frame, it's a talking frame that blank is better than blank because. So everyone gets used to it. I think similar to what you were talking about with the civil, teaching that civil class discussion, it's having a really set framework for how we respond so that we get both respectful answers, but also answers that have a little bit more evidence that goes along with them as well.
That's outstanding.
Turn and talk. That's a classic.
Yep. Turn and talk to.
As you see, think, wonder.
Give one, get one. Yep. Oh, Socratic seminars. Awesome.
And I see a comment too that a lot of these seem similar to Avid strategies. That's a great resource, when you're looking for ways to engage students and to get all the students in your classroom to participate. And yep, we see jigsaws using accountable talk. Susie, one question that came up a little bit earlier was someone had mentioned that they kind of struggle with keeping the timing, when they're doing things, even like that quick little icebreaker we did with the this or that topics. Do you use a timer in your classroom to kind of keep things on track, or what methods have you found effective?
I think using the timer clock, like what we had at the beginning of class, and sometimes, maybe playing a song. You have until the end of this song, and maybe the song is actually, historically related to something that you're teaching, and it's 3 minutes long or 5 minutes long or 2 songs, whatever you need for how much time you need. I think that makes it a little bit more historically fun watching the clock, because honestly, I'd say that I mostly just watch the clock and the students. And I'm pushing the ones that maybe need a little nudging. And those of you that have been teachers longer, you kind of have a sense of time, right? And you don't want to start a discussion if students aren't ready for it. But yeah, we're seeing using timers. I think a lot of teachers really like to use those now that they're so available and you can just plug them into your slideshow.
Very cool. I feel like having those smart speakers in the classroom has been a savior with that too. Just being able to say, start a 5-minute timer anytime. And
I love what Nikki Padden had to say. When starting discussion, I remind them of the 4 L's. Look at each other, lean in, lower your voice, and listen. That is awesome.
Awesome.
Don't be creepy when you lean in.
I love seeing that. And it's such a great time, as we're getting ready to start the school year to think about things like that. Cause that's, that can be that first, week, 2 weeks of school where you're really taking the time to teach those practices. And, you invest that time up front to teach those 4 L's, and you're going to benefit from it for the rest of the year. Awesome.
Just a quick reminder, I know there's just so many amazing. Karen Brooks, giving students a set number of chips to place in the middle when they talk. So you know, everyone gets to talk equally. And that helps alleviate the one or two students that like to dominate discussions. Sometimes when I would set up groups for response groups, I would put all the talkers in one group so that they couldn't get into another group and dominate the conversation, because you know they're going to. It's great ideas. And Natasha, just quick, I think everybody's going to get a recorded version of this, so they'll have access to these chat ideas.
Yes, yep, there will be recordings of all the different sessions. You'll get emailed those next week.
Okay, so that way you don't feel like you're like trying to take notes on all these fabulous ideas being shared by your colleagues. Okay, so now I'm going to look at, you know, with the time that we have, which we have a little bit of time, actual activities in TCI. I did note in chat that some of you don't have a TCI program yet. Some of you, there was one that's going to be teaching middle school that hasn't used TCI. So now you'll get an idea of just quick, kind of pay attention to how I'm navigating, but that's not really the purpose of this session. But I'll show you what resources you can find, okay? And we're going to look at some actual TCI response group activities. The first one we're going to look at is from the America's Past program, which is typically taught at the 5th grade level nationally. This is from lesson 18, Manifest Destiny and Settling the West. So this is actually a snag of the slide that's in the actual lesson slides that are provided to you in your teacher subscription. So again, we see this in the activity overview that students are in a group of 3. There's handouts associated with many of these response groups where it, you know, it's sometimes 1 per student, or perhaps it's 1 per group, and it has tasks for them to do. This is part of that step in response groups, preparing them to be able to respond. And oftentimes the reading from the text is, from the student text, is built into each round of the response groups. So in this one, so I'm going to actually go live to my America's Past program. And I'm in my home looking at all the different units. So the lesson that I chose is in Manifest Destiny to Today, Unit 5. And when I open that, I can see all the unit activities. So I'm going to go down to lesson 18, Manifest Destiny and Settling the West. When I open this, it's going to be the slides to the lesson, but I want to draw your attention to something that recently changed in TCI subscriptions. So if I go down to lesson, I have the lesson overview. I have, and that's what I'm going to get to when I get to Manifest Destiny. I have materials. I can go in and look at the textbook online, lesson games. So I'm going to go into materials, okay, and scroll down. And what is it?
You're on
Natasha.
the unit level.
Oh, I passed it. Here it is. So the teacher guide, okay? So this is going to be your one-stop shop for you as the teacher, looking at everything you need to teach this lesson, okay? So this is Unit 5 lessons. But what I'm going to do, actually, so you can see the unit, and I'm not going to scroll through the whole thing because, again, that's not the purpose of what we're doing. So I'm going to go to our lesson, which is Manifest Destiny. And then when I open up the teacher guide, this is specific just to this lesson in Unit 5. So I have the unit overview, the objectives, the activity planning. So just quickly note that when I get to the activity, it's telling me exactly what I need to do, the description of each part of the activity and how long it's going to take. Okay, so the teacher guides are new. Just wanted to quick, those of you that are experienced with TCI, that is there for you. And it's pretty awesome. I was taking a look at them yesterday. So now I'm going to go into the activity slideshow, the one with the big hand. And here's my 2 response group activities. This particular lesson actually has 2 response group phases. So the first one is where students actually learn the order of territorial expansion and territorial acquisitions to the United States. And then they go into this one, this phase. So this might be 2 different days in your classroom. So you're doing everything that we've already talked about. Your students are in groups of 3. You've done your warm up. You have your students ready to go. So here's your overview. They receive a handout, which is in your materials section, that has the questions, these questions that they have to answer. Each group member leads a discussion on their assigned question. So I think this is a perfect time for everyone restate, because the person that had question number 1 could share their answer. Everybody restates the answer. So before they actually have to share it with the class, they have everything that they need. Okay. And then just as I go through the slides, there's more instructions for me, and students at a glance can see all the different perspectives that they're going to have on American territorial acquisition during Manifest Destiny. And in their groups, they're going to be exposed to 2 contrarian quotes. So one perspective versus another on this topic. And that's one of the main historical thinking skills, is perspective, right? So decide which question on the handout each group member will be responsible for after reading the quotes. They're doing all of this in their small safe harbor group. And when their slide is projected, they will share with the class. So this comes back to, you asked about timing. So now each group has the handout for Louisiana Purchase. Their handout looks pretty similar to this. It has the 2 quotes. It has the map that specifically shows Louisiana Territory. Each student in the group is responsible for one of these questions, and then how they have to share them with the class. So then I go to the next slide, and it's the next topic, Lewis and Clark. Okay. So once you feel your students are ready, I would say this one is a little bit more time consuming. It's a 5th grade lesson. Maybe it's 10 minutes for your students to prepare for this one. So you just kind of have to monitor that yourself. And then you're going to have your students share. All presenters stand, however it is that you choose to have them do that. But if you go back to the teacher guide tells you, to have your students stand, and everybody in the group shares their responses to the questions and so on. Okay, so that's the extent to which a response group activity is actually presented to you, the teacher. You have everything you need, including materials, handouts that you need for your students, that you could print out, or if they're using the pre-printed student notebook, which they have at the elementary level, this would be in there. So here are the 2 quotes, here are the questions, and that's what they're doing when they're preparing. Natasha, did any questions come up while we were looking at that lesson?
Nope, I think we're good, Susie.
Okay. And we're at 10:03. So that's how response group activities work in the classroom. What I encourage you to do, like, for example, I'm not going to go live into this program, but here's one for 8th grade, middle school, and students are discussing excerpts from the Declaration of Sentiments that came out of the Seneca Falls Convention, and they're going to be presented with facts of where women are today. And so they have to look at then, they have to look at now, and they have to prepare a response to whether or not the grievances from the Declaration of Sentiments have been redressed. So that's an 8th grade response group. And then here's one from high school. I know I don't have too many high schoolers out there, but this one deals with, somebody mentioned earlier that you used, I know I wrote it down because it was a great idea, talking frames. So this one actually uses talking frames for cause and effect, and students have to create cause and effect responses to the Industrial Revolution. And this is for world history, and share those. And there's, everything's up on the screen for them to use. There's sometimes manipulation, putting things in order, and students come up. If you have a view board or a smart board, they can actually, put their response up there for everybody to see. Okay, so scoring class discussions. This is where, I think somebody asked earlier, is this going to be on the test? Well, in my case, it's always a project grade. However you choose to handle it is up to you, however you do your grading. But I like to make students accountable for response groups and actually score the discussions. Now, you're not scoring whether they have correct or incorrect responses, because the questions are more ambiguous than that. But you want to keep them attentive, and you want to give them guidelines for each phase of the activity, okay? So perhaps they're being scored on providing evidence from the quotes in that activity I went over with you in America's Past. And if they actually provided a fact to support their response for question number 3, they're golden. They get the point for that. So here's a suggestion. So you can take, this and manipulate it to your needs and your teaching style. But perhaps you inform everybody and give them that comfort zone that they're all starting with 75 points out of 100. And as the presenters are speaking, points are going to be added to the total. And maybe you have criteria like looking at the presenter that called on you while speaking, that we want them to have that eye contact. So looking, that's part of one of the 4 L's. Using the previous presenter's name or group name, if you're using those. Opening statement, disagreeing with reasoning, agreeing, providing data, and other. So you could create your own. We don't have this because there's so many different variations, but this is something you could create, is what's the criterion that you're going to use? And you pick one, just one. You don't want to have all of these for every round. So let's say using the student's name is for round 1. And then for round 2, it's providing additional support and data that they're actually using claim, evidence, reasoning in their response. Okay, so that's just a suggestion for scoring and keeping students accountable. So we have finished with the actual response group portion of our lesson. Just want to make sure that there's no lingering questions out there.
Yeah, Susie, one thing, David did ask for a link to that discussion tally sheet. Do you have one of that available that you could share?
I could come up with one, absolutely,
okay.
And provide a link on the slides before it's shared.
Perfect. That sounds great. Okay. The other thing I just wanted to share, like looking at those examples that you had shown from 8th grade, the Seneca Falls response group, and then the Manifest Destiny response group discussion, was just at a workshop where they were talking about trying to get students to use multiple sources, both primary sources and secondary sources, and then focusing on disciplinary literacy of having students like pull evidence from that, have discourse like a historian would. And just seeing those 2 examples you shared, I would, was like, here, great. We've done it for you, that you've got those, those different sources and perspectives that students are, are looking at, and then being able to kind of make meaning from and share, share responses in this response group format. Just, really pulls together, what they were saying as a best practice for history instruction in this workshop. I just would.
Oh, absolutely. And, we all know that as history teachers, that's front and center. I spent some years teaching advanced placement and how to navigate through primary sources, and primary sources aren't always written, quotes or excerpts. They're pictures, they're political cartoons. Then we have, every program has all of those. The kids love the political cartoon ones. So brilliant. Okay, so just a few reminders. I know Brian talked about this in the welcome session if you attended that, but we do have in-app PD available to help you navigate your subscriptions and beyond, with additional topics that you could use, especially with our new videos that are built in. They're pretty cool, the video lessons that are in our programs. So you can get TCI certified and take those. You could be part of our coach program. This is just where you kind of step up and help other teachers in your district or at your school site by modeling lessons or hosting planning sessions or communicating product update. You get this cool TCI coach badge, and you would get professional development hours just like you're getting for today. Of course, the coveted TCI swag. You can't go wrong with that. And recognition. Oh, pat on the back. These are the sessions that you can choose to go to during what we're calling period 2 or block 2. And if you go, once I end this webinar, you go back to the lobby, which might be a tab on the top of your page. It might feel like you left entirely, but no fear. All you have to do is go to the top of your page. Like you can see mine, my lobby is still open for me to go back to once I exit this webinar.
And Susie, I put that link into chat too. So go ahead before you leave, like click on that button just so you make sure you have it. And that's going to take you to the lobby with the summit sessions. And if you click on hide ended sessions, you'll only see those, those sessions that are going to be offered for period 2. So, and then you just click on join and you'll be able to get in there. If you don't see a join button, just give it a minute because we may have a presenter that's running from their first period Zoom to second period. So just be patient and you should see that join button come up in that lobby in the next minute or 2.
Thank you everybody for attending. I hope you got just a little bit out of this that you can take back to your classrooms this fall.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Grab that lobby link and head to your second period class.